You wake up one morning in ancient Egypt. The year is 1350 BCE, and you feel that familiar cramping sensation low in your abdomen. Your monthly bleeding has begun, but there are no pharmacies to visit, no heating pads to plug in, no over the counter pain relievers to swallow. Instead, you reach for a bundle of soft linen strips your mother prepared for you, along with a mixture of crushed dates and honey that the temple healers swear will ease the pain. As you wrap the cloth around your hips and drink the bitter concoction, you wonder how women in distant lands manage this same monthly trial. What you don't realize is that across the ancient world, millions of women are facing this exact challenge using methods that would seem both ingenious and shocking by modern standards. From the papyrus tampons of the Nile Valley to the moss-lined cloth pouches of Celtic Britain, from the ash and herb remedies of ancient Greece to the elaborate purification rituals of Mesopotamia, women have been managing menstruation with remarkable creativity and resilience for thousands of years. This isn't just a story about periods. This is a story about human ingenuity in the face of biological necessity, about the universal experience that connected women across vast distances and cultural differences, and about the pain and shame that societies imposed on half their population simply for being female. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. Please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. To understand the ancient world's approach to menstruation, we must first grasp how fundamentally different their understanding was from our modern medical knowledge. Ancient peoples had no concept of hormones, ovulation cycles, or the biological purpose of menstruation. Instead, they developed elaborate theories that ranged from the mystical to the medical, often viewing monthly bleeding as everything from divine punishment to supernatural power. In ancient Egypt, menstruation was seen as a form of purification, a monthly cleansing that prepared women for potential pregnancy. Egyptian medical papyri describe the process as the body expelling corrupted blood that would otherwise poison the system. This wasn't entirely wrong from their perspective, and it led to some surprisingly sophisticated approaches to menstrual management. Egyptian women used soft linen tampons, often soaked in honey and acacia gum, which we now know has mild antiseptic properties. The Greeks, with their love of complex theories, developed the idea that menstrual blood was simply regular blood that had been corrupted by the heat of the womb. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, wrote extensively about menstruation, describing it as necessary for women's health, but dangerous if not properly managed. Greek women used sea sponges tied with strings, a method that was surprisingly effective and would be recognizable to modern users of menstrual cups or tampons. Roman attitudes were more practical but also more restrictive. They viewed menstruation as a monthly illness that required careful management to prevent contamination of food, wine, and sacred spaces. Roman women used wool tampons or strips of soft cloth, often treated with various herbs and oils. The wealthy could afford imported cotton from Egypt or silk from China, while poorer women made do with whatever fabric they could obtain. But it was the pain associated with menstruation that truly united women across cultures and centuries. The cramping, the backaches, the headaches, and the general malaise that accompanied monthly bleeding were universal experiences that demanded solutions. Ancient healers, both male and female, developed an arsenal of remedies that ranged from the practical to the bizarre. Egyptian medical texts recommend a mixture of honey, iodide dates, and carob for menstrual pain, combined with gentle massage of the lower abdomen. Archaeological evidence suggests that wealthy Egyptian women had access to heated stones wrapped in linen, an ancient version of the heating pad. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents in existence, contains detailed instructions for preparing menstrual pain remedies, including recipes that call for specific herbs to be gathered at certain phases of the moon. Greek physicians took a more systematic approach, categorizing different types of menstrual pain and prescribing specific treatments for each. They used willow bark, which we now know contains salicin, a precursor to aspirin. They also prescribed warm baths infused with aromatic herbs, physical exercise to promote blood flow, and dietary changes that emphasized foods believed to balance the body's humors. The preparation of these remedies was often a communal activity that bonded women across generations. In ancient Celtic societies, older women would gather specific plants during certain lunar phases, drying and storing them for use throughout the year. The knowledge of which herbs to use, how to prepare them, and when to administer them was passed down through female lineages, creating an informal but sophisticated medical tradition. But the physical management of menstruation was only part of the challenge. Ancient societies also imposed complex social and religious restrictions on menstruating women that could turn an already difficult time into a period of complete isolation and shame. These taboos varied dramatically between cultures but shared common themes of contamination, spiritual impurity, and social exclusion. In ancient Mesopotamia, menstruating women were considered ritually unclean and were forbidden from entering temples, handling food, or even touching certain household objects. The Code of Hammurabi contains specific provisions about menstrual impurity, including punishments for women who violated these taboos. Mesopotamian women developed elaborate purification rituals involving multiple baths, specific prayers, and offerings to various goddesses associated with fertility and cleansing. Jewish law, as recorded in the Torah and later elaborated in the Talmud, established the concept of nida, a state of ritual impurity during menstruation that required specific purification procedures. Women were separated from their families, forbidden from cooking or touching their husbands, and required to undergo ritual bathing in a mikvah before being considered clean again. These laws created a monthly cycle of isolation that profoundly shaped women's social and domestic lives. The psychological impact of these restrictions cannot be overstated. Imagine being told from childhood that your natural bodily functions made you spiritually contaminated, that your very presence could pollute sacred spaces and corrupt food. Ancient women learned to internalize shame about their bodies, to see their monthly bleeding not as a normal biological process, but as evidence of their fundamental impurity. Yet within these restrictive frameworks, women found ways to create community and support systems. The Greek historian Plutarch describes women's gatherings during menstruation where they would share remedies, tell stories, and provide emotional support to one another. These informal networks became crucial for transmitting medical knowledge and coping strategies across generations. Roman women developed their own traditions around menstrual management, including special prayers to Juno Lucina, the goddess of childbirth and women's health. They created protective amulets and charms designed to ease menstrual pain and regulate cycles. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii includes numerous small figurines and carved stones that appear to have been used in menstrual rituals. The economic aspects of ancient menstrual management reveal stark class differences that determined not just comfort but basic health and hygiene. Wealthy women had access to fine linen, imported cotton, and silk for their menstrual cloths. They could afford the best herbs and spices for pain relief, the services of skilled healers, and private spaces for managing their periods with dignity. Poor women faced much harsher realities. They used whatever fabric they could obtain, often rough wool or hemp, that could cause irritation and infection. Their pain remedies consisted of common weeds and roots, if they could afford any treatment at all. Many poor women continued working throughout their periods, whether in fields, workshops, or as domestic servants, without any accommodation for their physical discomfort. The preparation and maintenance of menstrual cloths was a constant concern for all women regardless of class. These fabrics had to be washed, dried, and stored carefully to prevent infection and odor. In climates where privacy was limited and water was scarce, this became a significant challenge. Women developed ingenious methods for cleaning their menstrual cloths discreetly, using everything from sand and ash to fermented urine as cleaning agents. Archaeological evidence from ancient settlements reveals the sophisticated logistics required for menstrual management. Excavations at Roman sites have uncovered specialized washing areas that appear to have been used specifically for cleaning menstrual cloths. These areas were typically located away from food preparation spaces and included drainage systems designed to handle the regular washing of blood-stained fabrics. The knowledge systems surrounding menstruation were remarkably sophisticated for their time. Ancient healers understood the connection between diet and menstrual health, prescribing specific foods to regulate cycles and reduce pain. They recognized that physical activity could help with cramping, and that certain herbs could affect bleeding patterns. This knowledge was primarily held and transmitted by women, creating parallel medical traditions that existed alongside male-dominated official medicine. However, the documentation of this women's medical knowledge was limited by the fact that most ancient societies restricted women's access to literacy. The remedies and techniques that women developed were passed down orally, making them vulnerable to loss and distortion over time. When male physicians did write about menstruation, they often dismissed or misunderstood women's actual experiences, focusing instead on theoretical explanations that had little connection to practical reality. The seasonal challenges of menstrual management added another layer of complexity to ancient women's lives. Winter brought particular hardships, as cold temperatures made washing and drying menstrual cloths difficult. Women in northern climates developed techniques for warming their cloths by fires or heated stones, but these methods carried risks of burns or scorching the precious fabric. Summer presented different challenges, as heat and humidity increased the risk of infection and made the physical discomfort of menstruation even more intense. Ancient women learned to time certain activities around their cycles, avoiding long journeys or strenuous work during their heaviest bleeding days when possible. The intersection of menstruation with warfare and social upheaval created additional hardships that modern women can barely imagine. During sieges or military campaigns, access to clean water and private spaces for menstrual management became luxury items. Women refugees or prisoners had to manage their periods without any of their usual supplies or support systems, often using grass, leaves, or rags salvaged from whatever was available. Trade routes and cultural exchange played crucial roles in spreading menstrual management techniques across ancient civilizations. Roman merchants brought Egyptian cotton and Greek sponges to distant provinces. Celtic traders carried knowledge of herbal remedies along with their goods. These exchanges meant that women in remote areas sometimes had access to sophisticated menstrual management techniques that had developed in urban centers thousands of miles away. The religious and mythological framework surrounding menstruation varied dramatically between cultures, but shared common themes of power, pollution, and transformation. Some societies viewed menstrual blood as magically potent, capable of both healing and harm. Others saw it as evidence of women's fundamental connection to lunar cycles and natural rhythms. These beliefs profoundly shaped how women understood their own bodies and their place in society. Ancient artwork and literature provide glimpses into how menstruation was perceived and discussed in various cultures. Greek pottery occasionally depicts women in what appear to be menstrual scenes, showing figures with claws positioned around their hips or engaging in purification rituals. Roman frescoes sometimes include coded references to women's monthly cycles, using symbolic imagery that would have been understood by contemporary viewers. The development of early calendars and timekeeping systems was intimately connected to menstrual cycles, as women were among the first humans to notice and track regular biological rhythms. Many ancient cultures used lunar months that closely corresponded to menstrual cycles, and women's ability to predict their periods may have contributed to early understanding of cyclical time. But beyond the practical challenges of managing bleeding and pain, ancient women faced the psychological burden of living in societies that viewed their natural bodily functions as shameful, dangerous, or polluting. This monthly reminder of their supposed inferiority was woven into the very fabric of ancient civilizations, affecting everything from religious practices to legal systems to family structures. The stories of how women coped with these challenges, how they developed ingenious solutions with limited resources, and how they created support networks despite social restrictions reveal a hidden history of resilience and innovation that has been largely overlooked by traditional historical narratives focused on male political and military achievements. As we delve deeper into the daily realities of ancient menstrual management, we discover that women developed remarkably sophisticated techniques for dealing with what was essentially a monthly medical emergency. In ancient China, women created elaborate systems using soft bamboo fiber wrapped in silk, often treated with powdered herbs that served both medicinal and aromatic purposes. The preparation of these materials was a ritual in itself, with mothers teaching daughters the precise techniques for achieving the right absorbency while maintaining comfort. Chinese medical texts from the Han Dynasty describe menstrual pain remedies that included ginger root boiled with brown sugar, a combination that modern science confirms has genuine anti-inflammatory properties. But more fascinating is how Chinese women learn to predict the severity of their monthly symptoms by observing subtle changes in their body temperature, sleep patterns, and even their dreams. This knowledge was considered so valuable that it was often part of a bride's dowry, written down in careful characters and passed from mother-in-law to daughter-in-law. The logistics of obtaining and preparing menstrual materials reveal the incredible resourcefulness of ancient women. In Scandinavia, where linen was a luxury, women used carefully prepared moss that had been cleaned, dried, and stored in special containers. Different types of moss were preferred for different purposes. Sphagnum moss for its natural antibacterial properties, and softer varieties for comfort during the heaviest bleeding days. The gathering of this moss was a communal activity that took place during specific seasons when the plants were at their most absorbent. Older women would lead groups of younger females into forests and wetlands, teaching them to identify the best varieties and explaining the proper techniques for harvesting without damaging the plants. These expeditions served multiple purposes, combining practical education with social bonding and the transmission of broader botanical knowledge. In ancient India, the Ayurvedic tradition developed complex theories about menstruation that connected it to the body's fundamental energies and the cosmic cycles that governed all life. Indian women used cotton cloths treated with turmeric and neem, both of which have proven antimicrobial properties. The preparation of these cloths involved elaborate rituals that were believed to enhance their protective qualities, with specific mantras recited during the treatment process. But perhaps most remarkably, ancient Indian texts describe pain management techniques that closely resemble modern understanding of endorphin release and muscle relaxation. Women were taught specific breathing exercises, gentle yoga postures, and meditation techniques designed to work with menstrual pain rather than simply enduring it. These practices were integrated into daily spiritual routines, transforming the experience of menstruation from pure suffering into an opportunity for deeper self-awareness. The seasonal variations in menstrual experience created challenges that required year-round planning and preparation. Women in Mediterranean climates learned to time their cloth-washing activities to take advantage of hot, dry weather that would quickly sanitize and dry their materials. They developed techniques for storing clean cloths in ways that prevented moisture and insect damage while keeping them easily accessible when needed. In northern climates, winter menstruation presented particular hardships that required ingenious solutions. Scandinavian women created portable warming devices using heated stones wrapped in leather, allowing them to maintain comfort even in freezing temperatures. They also developed special undergarments designed to hold these heating elements in place while maintaining the security of their menstrual cloths. The social dynamics surrounding menstrual taboos created complex systems of communication and support that operated largely invisible to male members of society. Women developed subtle signals and coded language that allowed them to share information about their cycles, warn each other about impending restrictions, and offer assistance during particularly difficult periods. In ancient Greece, these communication systems were so sophisticated that women could coordinate their activities to ensure that someone was always available to handle household duties when others were restricted by menstrual taboos. They created informal networks that extended beyond family units, connecting women across social classes and geographic areas through shared understanding of monthly challenges. The economic impact of menstrual management extended far beyond the cost of materials. Women who worked in trades that required consistent daily labor faced significant income loss during their most uncomfortable days. Female potters, weavers, and merchants developed strategies for maintaining productivity despite monthly disruptions, often working longer hours before and after their periods to compensate for reduced capacity during peak symptoms. Archaeological evidence from ancient workshops reveals accommodations that were clearly designed with menstrual cycles in mind. Some weaving facilities included private areas where women could rest during painful episodes, while still remaining close enough to supervise their work or provide guidance to apprentices. These spaces often contained storage areas for menstrual supplies and washing facilities specifically designed for cleaning blood-stained cloths. The development of herbal pain remedies represented one of humanity's earliest systematic approaches to pharmaceutical research. Ancient women conducted what amounted to controlled experiments, testing different combinations of plants and preparation methods to determine the most effective treatments. They documented their results through oral traditions that preserved detailed information about dosages, timing, and potential side effects. Some of these ancient remedies were remarkably sophisticated. Celtic women used willow bark tea combined with meadowsweet, creating a natural pain reliever that contained multiple compounds now known to reduce inflammation and muscle cramping. They enhanced the effectiveness by timing the administration to coincide with the onset of symptoms, demonstrating an understanding of preventive medicine that wouldn't be formally recognized by male physicians for centuries. The psychological techniques ancient women developed for coping with menstrual pain reveal deep understanding of the mind-body connection. Roman women practiced visualization exercises, imagining the pain as a temporary visitor that would eventually leave. They used storytelling and music as distraction techniques, gathering in groups to share tales that transported their minds away from physical discomfort. Greek women developed meditation practices that involved focusing on the cyclical nature of their symptoms, connecting their personal rhythms to larger natural cycles of seasons, tides, and lunar phases. This cosmic perspective helped transform the experience of pain from a meaningless burden into a meaningful connection to the fundamental rhythms of existence. The transmission of menstrual knowledge across generations created informal educational systems that were often more comprehensive than official medical training. Young girls learned not just the practical aspects of managing their periods, but also the cultural meanings, social expectations, and survival strategies necessary for navigating monthly challenges in their specific societies. These educational processes typically began years before menarche, with girls observing and gradually participating in the preparation of materials and remedies. They learned to recognize the plants used in pain treatments, to identify the signs that indicated the approach of menstruation, and to understand the social protocols that would govern their behavior during their cycles. The international exchange of menstrual management techniques reveals the extent to which women's knowledge networks transcended political and cultural boundaries. Roman wives married to military officers stationed in distant provinces brought Mediterranean techniques to Celtic and Germanic territories. Trade connections allowed Egyptian cotton and Greek sponges to reach women in remote areas who adapted these foreign materials to their local customs and needs. The adaptation process was remarkably creative, with women modifying imported techniques to work with locally available materials and cultural restrictions. British women learned to use Egyptian-style tampons made from local wool instead of cotton. Germanic women adapted Greek sponge techniques using moss and other absorbent materials found in their forests. The religious dimensions of menstrual management created parallel spiritual traditions that existed alongside official religious practices. Women developed private rituals and prayers specifically related to their monthly cycles, often invoking female deities or protective spirits that male-dominated religious hierarchies didn't recognize or acknowledge. These spiritual practices served multiple functions, providing psychological comfort during painful episodes while also creating sacred meaning around experiences that official religions often dismissed as unclean or shameful. Women transformed their monthly challenges into opportunities for spiritual growth and connection with divine feminine principles. The documentation that does survive from ancient women's menstrual traditions reveals sophisticated understanding of nutrition, herbal medicine, and psychological support that rivals modern approaches in many ways. These women were conducting empirical research, testing hypotheses, and refining treatments based on observed results, all while operating within societies that denied them formal education or recognition for their medical knowledge. The legacy of their innovations continued to influence women's health practices for centuries, with many traditional remedies persisting in folk medicine long after the original cultural context had disappeared. The knowledge they preserved and transmitted represents one of humanity's earliest systematic approaches to managing chronic pain and cyclical health challenges. Yet despite their remarkable ingenuity and resilience, these women remained largely invisible in historical records, dominated by male perspectives and concerns. Their monthly struggles, their innovative solutions, and their supportive communities existed in the shadows of official history, acknowledged only when they intersected with male interests or concerns. The true scope of their achievements becomes clear only when we examine the archaeological evidence, the fragments of medical texts, and the persistent folk traditions that preserved echoes of their sophisticated knowledge systems. These sources reveal that the management of menstruation in the ancient world was not just a matter of basic hygiene, but a complex field of knowledge that encompassed medicine, psychology, social organization, and spiritual practice. The evidence of ancient women's menstrual management extends far beyond what we might expect from civilizations we often dismiss as primitive. In the ruins of Pompeii, archaeologists discovered what appears to be an ancient pharmacy specifically dedicated to women's health, complete with grinding stone still tainted with residue from herbs known to treat menstrual pain. The shop's layout suggests it was run by women, for women, creating a safe space where intimate health concerns could be discussed without the shame and judgment that characterized most medical interactions of the era. But perhaps nowhere is the sophistication of ancient menstrual management more evident than in the elaborate preparation rituals that surrounded the creation of menstrual supplies. In ancient Persia, the process of preparing menstrual cloths was considered so important that it was regulated by royal decree. The finest cotton had to be washed 7 times in running water, dried under specific lunar phases, and blessed by Zoroastrian priests before it could be used by women of the noble classes. The Persian system reveals how menstrual management became intertwined with social status and political power. The quality of a woman's menstrual supplies served as a visible marker of her family's wealth and position. Noble women displayed their fine cotton cloths and elaborate silver containers for storing them as symbols of their elevated status, while simultaneously using these same items to manage the monthly bleeding that society viewed as evidence of their fundamental inferiority. This contradiction, using luxury items to manage something considered shameful, created psychological tensions that ancient women navigated with remarkable sophistication. They developed elaborate mental frameworks that allowed them to maintain dignity and self-respect while complying with societal expectations of shame and concealment. Persian women, for example, created private ceremonies around the preparation of their menstrual supplies, transforming practical necessity into spiritual ritual that affirmed their worth, despite cultural messages to the contrary. The geographic challenges of obtaining suitable materials for menstrual management shaped trade routes and economic relationships in ways that historians are only beginning to understand. The demand for soft, absorbent fabrics created markets that stretched across continents. Egyptian cotton was prized throughout the Roman Empire not just for clothing, but specifically for its superior qualities as menstrual material. This specialized demand influenced everything from agricultural practices in the Nile Delta to shipping schedules across the Mediterranean. In regions where suitable natural materials were scarce, women developed remarkable innovations that demonstrate the power of necessity to drive technological advancement. Desert-dwelling Bedouin women created reusable menstrual devices using carefully treated leather and wool, designing them to be easily cleaned with minimal water while providing maximum comfort during long journeys across harsh terrain. These devices were so effective that variations of their design persisted in nomadic cultures for centuries. The seasonal rhythms of ancient life created additional layers of complexity in menstrual management that modern women can barely imagine. Agricultural societies organized their entire calendars around planting and harvest cycles, but women had to navigate these demands while also managing their monthly bleeding. During harvest season, when every able body was needed in the fields, menstruating women faced impossible choices between contributing to their family's survival and managing their physical needs. Ancient women developed sophisticated strategies for maintaining productivity despite these constraints. They learned to predict their cycles with remarkable accuracy, planning major activities around their anticipated bleeding days. Some cultures developed rotation systems where women would coordinate their agricultural work to ensure that someone was always available when others were incapacitated by menstrual symptoms. The preservation and storage of menstrual supplies required knowledge and techniques that were passed down through generations like precious family secrets. In climates where moisture and insects posed constant threats, women created elaborate storage systems using specific types of wood, particular herbs, and carefully designed containers that protected their precious supplies while keeping them easily accessible. The containers themselves became objects of beauty and craftsmanship, with wealthy women commissioning elaborately decorated boxes and baskets specifically for storing menstrual cloths. Archaeological discoveries have revealed examples of these containers from across the ancient world, many showing signs of daily use over many years, testament to their importance in women's lives. But the true ingenuity of ancient menstrual management becomes most apparent when we examine how women adapted their techniques to the specific challenges of their environments and circumstances. In ancient Japan, where space was at a premium and privacy was limited, women developed folding techniques that allowed them to create highly absorbent menstrual pads using minimal fabric. These techniques were so efficient that they influenced broader textile arts, with origami and fabric folding methods traceable to innovations first developed for menstrual management. The social networks that supported menstrual management created bonds between women that transcended the usual boundaries of class, age, and family relationships. When a young woman experienced her first period, she was welcomed into a community of shared experience that provided not just practical knowledge but emotional support for navigating the challenges ahead. These initiation processes were often more meaningful and comprehensive than the formal coming-of-age ceremonies that societies provided for young men. The mentorship relationships that developed around menstrual management created informal apprenticeship systems where older women passed down not just technical knowledge, but wisdom about surviving in societies that viewed women's bodies as problematic. Young women learned not just how to manage their bleeding, but how to maintain dignity in the face of shame, how to find privacy in crowded households, and how to access help when pain became unbearable. The medical knowledge that ancient women developed around menstruation was remarkably sophisticated, incorporating understanding of anatomy, pharmacology, and psychology that wouldn't be formally recognized by male-dominated medicine for centuries. They understood that menstrual pain originated in muscle contractions and developed treatments that specifically targeted muscle relaxation. They recognized the connection between emotional state and physical symptoms, creating therapies that addressed both mental and physical aspects of menstrual distress. Ancient Chinese women developed diagnostic techniques that allowed them to predict not just when their periods would arrive, but how severe their symptoms would be. They learned to read subtle changes in their pulse patterns, the color and texture of their skin, and even the quality of their dreams to anticipate their monthly challenges. This knowledge allowed them to prepare both physically and mentally for difficult periods, often preventing symptoms from becoming severe through early intervention. The pain management techniques that ancient women developed reveal sophisticated understanding of what modern medicine calls the gate control theory. The idea that the nervous system can only process so much sensory information at once. They used heat, cold, pressure, and distraction to overwhelm pain signals, creating relief through sensory competition rather than chemical intervention. Roman women developed elaborate massage techniques that combined pressure point therapy with aromatic oils, creating treatments that addressed both physical pain and emotional distress. These massages were performed by skilled female slaves who specialized in women's health, creating a professional class of practitioners who maintained and developed medical knowledge outside the formal structures of male-dominated medicine. The international exchange of menstrual management techniques reveals how women's knowledge networks operated across cultural and political boundaries. When Roman legions conquered new territories, the wives and female slaves who followed the armies brought their menstrual management techniques with them, but they also learned from local women who had developed solutions adapted to different climates and resources. This cultural exchange created hybrid techniques that combined the best innovations from different traditions. British women learned to use Roman-style sponges but adapted them with local moss for enhanced absorbency. Germanic women adopted Mediterranean herbal remedies but modified them using plants native to their forests. These adaptations created regional variations that reflected both practical necessities and cultural preferences. The seasonal variations in menstrual experience created challenges that required year-round planning and sophisticated resource management. Women in northern climates had to gather and preserve medicinal plants during brief summer seasons, creating stores that would last through long winters when fresh herbs were unavailable. They developed preservation techniques that maintained the potency of their remedies while preventing spoilage and contamination. The timing of these gathering expeditions became crucial elements of community planning, with groups of women coordinating their activities to ensure that everyone had access to necessary supplies. These expeditions served multiple functions, combining practical necessity with social bonding and the transmission of botanical knowledge that was essential for survival in harsh environments. The psychological impact of monthly menstrual challenges created lasting effects that shaped ancient women's understanding of their bodies, their capabilities, and their place in society. The recurring experience of pain and physical limitation reinforced cultural messages about female weakness and inferiority, but it also created opportunities for developing resilience, community bonds, and practical knowledge that served women throughout their lives. The coping strategies that ancient women developed for managing menstrual challenges became broader life skills that helped them navigate other difficulties. They learned to plan ahead, to create support networks, to find privacy and dignity in challenging circumstances, and to maintain hope and humor in the face of recurring hardship. These skills served them well in societies where women faced numerous restrictions and challenges beyond their monthly cycles. The economic implications of menstrual management created hidden costs that affected household budgets and family planning in ways that were rarely acknowledged in official records. The expense of maintaining adequate supplies of clean cloths, effective pain remedies, and private spaces for managing menstruation represented significant investments that families had to plan for and prioritize. Wealthy families could afford to dedicate servants specifically to managing women's menstrual needs, creating specialized roles that required training and expertise in what amounted to a form of medical care. These servants maintained supplies, prepared remedies, assisted with bathing and cleaning, and provided emotional support during difficult periods. Their knowledge and skills were valuable enough that experienced menstrual attendants could command high wages and were often retained by families for decades. The documentation that survives from ancient civilizations provides only glimpses of the sophisticated knowledge systems that women developed around menstrual management. But these fragments reveal practices and understanding that demonstrate remarkable innovation and effectiveness. The true scope of their achievements becomes apparent only when we examine the archaeological evidence alongside the scattered references in medical texts and the persistent folk traditions that preserved echoes of their knowledge. These ancient women faced monthly challenges that would overwhelm most modern people. Yet they not only survived, but created systems of support, knowledge, and care that sustained them through decades of reproductive life. Their innovations in pain management, hygiene, and psychological coping laid foundations for women's health practices that persisted for centuries, influencing traditional medicine and folk remedies that are only now being validated by modern scientific research. Their legacy extends far beyond the practical innovations they created. These women established patterns of female solidarity and knowledge sharing that would persist across millennia. In medieval Europe, Christian nuns continued to use modified versions of Roman herbal remedies, carefully copying recipes into illuminated manuscripts that preserved ancient wisdom within monastery walls. Islamic scholars translated Greek and Persian texts about women's health, ensuring that centuries of accumulated knowledge survived the fall of empires and the rise of new civilizations. The Industrial Revolution would eventually transform menstrual management with mass-produced materials and standardized products, but the fundamental challenges remained unchanged. Women still needed absorbent materials, effective pain relief, and supportive communities. The solutions that ancient women pioneered, understanding cyclical patterns, using heat therapy, creating female support networks, and developing herbal remedies, formed the foundation for every advancement that followed. Modern research has validated many of their innovations with startling accuracy. The willow bark that Celtic women brewed into tea contains salicin, the same compound that forms the basis of aspirin. The heat therapy that Roman women used triggers the same neurological responses that modern heating pads target. The breathing exercises developed by ancient Indian women activate the parasympathetic nervous system in ways that contemporary pain management specialists now recommend. The psychological coping strategies they developed demonstrate understanding of human resilience that rivals modern therapeutic approaches. Ancient women learned to reframe their monthly challenges as opportunities for reflection and community bonding. They created rituals that transformed necessary tasks into meaningful ceremonies. They found ways to maintain dignity and self-worth, despite living in societies that consistently devalued their experiences. Perhaps most remarkably, they accomplished all of this while operating within systems designed to silence their voices and dismiss their knowledge. The medical innovations they developed were rarely credited to them in official records. The support networks they created operated in the shadows of male-dominated social structures. The wisdom they accumulated was transmitted through informal channels that left few traces in historical documents. Yet their influence shaped the daily lives of countless generations of women. Every technique for managing menstrual flow, every remedy for cramping pain, every method for maintaining hygiene and dignity during monthly bleeding can be traced back to innovations first developed by women who had no formal medical training, but possessed something equally valuable: direct experience combined with desperate necessity. The archaeological evidence continues to reveal new aspects of their sophisticated knowledge systems. Recent excavations in ancient Mesopotamian sites have uncovered what appear to be specialized workshops, where women prepared menstrual supplies on a commercial scale. Chemical analysis of residues found in ancient containers has identified complex herbal formulations that demonstrate pharmaceutical knowledge rivaling modern preparations. These discoveries challenge traditional assumptions about the primitive nature of ancient medicine and the limited roles of women in early civilizations. The evidence suggests that women created parallel medical systems that operated alongside and often surpassed the theoretical knowledge of male physicians. While men wrote treatises about the nature of female anatomy, women were conducting practical research, testing treatments, and developing effective solutions to real problems. The social structures that emerged around menstrual management created opportunities for female leadership and expertise that existed nowhere else in ancient societies. Women who became known for their skill in preparing effective remedies or managing difficult cases could gain influence and respect that transcended normal gender limitations. These informal medical specialists formed networks that connected communities across vast distances, sharing knowledge and techniques through marriage connections, trade relationships, and religious pilgrimages. The spiritual dimensions of menstrual management created sacred spaces where women could explore aspects of their identity and experience that male-dominated religions ignored or condemned. The monthly cycle of bleeding, pain, and recovery became a framework for understanding larger patterns of death and renewal, suffering and healing, isolation and community. Women developed theological perspectives that honored their biological experiences rather than condemning them. These alternative spiritual traditions influenced broader cultural developments in ways that are only beginning to be understood. The lunar calendars that many ancient societies used were originally developed by women tracking their menstrual cycles. The agricultural festivals that celebrated seasonal cycles drew inspiration from women's understanding of biological rhythms. The goddess religions that honored female fertility and power emerged from communities where women's monthly experiences were seen as connections to divine forces rather than evidence of divine displeasure. The economic impact of women's menstrual management systems extended throughout ancient societies in ways that official records rarely acknowledged. The demand for specific types of cloth, particular herbs, and specialized containers created markets that influenced trade routes and agricultural practices. The labor required to prepare and maintain menstrual supplies represented significant economic activity that operated largely outside formal accounting systems. Women who specialized in providing menstrual management services created some of the earliest examples of female entrepreneurship. They established businesses that required expertise, maintained customer relationships across decades, and generated income that could support entire households. These enterprises operated within female networks that provided training, resources, and market connections independent of male-controlled economic structures. The technological innovations that women developed for menstrual management influenced broader developments in textile production, container design, and pharmaceutical preparation. The folding techniques required to create effective absorbent pads influenced broader textile arts. The preservation methods needed to store herbal remedies contributed to advances in food storage and chemical knowledge. The design principles used for menstrual containers influenced pottery, metalworking, and other crafts. The seasonal challenges of menstrual management drove innovations in resource planning and preservation that had applications far beyond women's health. The techniques women developed for gathering, processing, and storing medicinal plants contributed to broader botanical knowledge. The methods they created for maintaining hygiene with limited water resources influenced broader sanitation practices. The strategies they developed for managing periodic limitations contributed to understanding of cyclical planning and resource allocation. The international exchange of menstrual management techniques created some of the earliest examples of cross-cultural medical knowledge transfer. Women who traveled as wives, slaves, or refugees carried their knowledge to new environments where they shared techniques and learned local innovations. These exchanges created hybrid practices that combined the best elements from different traditions while adapting to local resources and cultural constraints. The documentation challenges that obscured women's menstrual management achievements reflect broader patterns of historical invisibility that affected all aspects of female experience. The knowledge they developed was transmitted through oral traditions that left few written traces. The innovations they created were often attributed to male physicians who encountered them secondhand. The social networks they established operated informally in ways that rarely attracted official attention. Yet the persistence of their influence across cultures and centuries demonstrates the effectiveness of their solutions and the strength of their knowledge transmission systems. Traditional remedies that can be traced back to ancient women's innovations continue to be used in many parts of the world. Folk practices that preserve echoes of their techniques persist in rural communities where modern medical resources remain limited. The psychological frameworks that ancient women developed for understanding and coping with menstrual challenges created templates for resilience that influenced broader approaches to managing chronic conditions and cyclical difficulties. They learned to work with their bodies rather than fighting against them, to find meaning in recurring challenges, and to create supportive communities around shared experiences. Their legacy reminds us that innovation often emerges from necessity rather than formal research, that effective solutions can develop outside official institutions, and that wisdom accumulated through direct experience can rival theoretical knowledge in practical applications. The women who used cloth, ash, and moss to manage their monthly bleeding created foundations for women's health that continue to influence medical practice and pharmaceutical development today. As we face contemporary challenges in women's healthcare, from period poverty to inadequate research funding to persistent cultural taboos, we can find inspiration in the resourcefulness, creativity, and determination of ancient women who refused to let monthly bleeding define their limitations. They transformed biological necessity into opportunities for innovation, community building, and knowledge creation that enriched not just their own lives, but the broader human understanding of health, healing, and resilience. The next time you reach for a modern pain reliever, use a heating pad, or benefit from any aspect of contemporary menstrual management, remember the countless generations of women who face the same challenges with nothing but their ingenuity, determination, and mutual support. Their stories deserve to be remembered not as curiosities from a primitive past, but as testament to human creativity in the face of adversity and evidence of the sophisticated knowledge systems that women have always created to care for themselves and each other. In recognizing their achievements, we honor not just their individual struggles and innovations, but the broader truth that progress often emerges from the margins, that necessity drives the most meaningful innovations, and that the experiences of ordinary people facing daily challenges can generate wisdom that shapes the development of human civilization in profound and lasting ways.